Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I am going to be reviewing a new game by Darrington Press. This is my look at Candela Obscura. Let's roll it. Two things before we get started. First, I do want to point out that I did receive a review copy from Darrington Press to do this review. I have received no other compensation from Darrington Press except to get the book to do the review. That is it. I am giving my free and fair thoughts for it. Also, normally in my reviews, I do a look at the layout and the design. However, I covered that in a quick look video a couple weeks back, and I will be sharing that link in the description below. And if I remember to do it, probably up here or over there in a corner, you can go and check out that video. It's really short, but it is a very well presented book. Let's get to the review. So, the world of Candela Obscura is rather interesting. It takes place in the city of Newfair, which is essentially a Gilded Age level of technology, so early 1900s, right around World War I level. And so it's got this kind of clash of worlds, old and new, built into it from that. So, very much a real world analog, even though this does not take place on Earth. New Fair is actually built on the ruins of an ancient civilization called Old Fair, and this civilization tried to use magic much in the same way that we use the internet or electricity. They tried to power it and empower growth inside the culture. They were unable to contain it, however, because in this world, magic is real and it is also very dangerous. It inflicts a corrupting influence on those who encounter it that is called bleed. And in fact, Old Fair was destroyed because it was unable to deal with the effects of bleed as they were pouring more and more magic out into the world. And the legacy of Old Fair lives on because the ruins have created a lot of spaces called thinnings where the magical realm can break in and inflict a lot of bleed on people and unleash monsters and other terrible things. And so this is a great struggle that you have, this modern city that is growing into a more modern industrialized age, and it's built on the ruins of this magical realm that was destroyed by its own corruption. And those two things are not going to blend well. Most of the people in this world, however, are unaware that magic exists. It breaks in, as I said, through thinnings, and there is a group called Candela Obscura, the name of the game, which is dedicated to investigating every thinning and other magical phenomena so it can be contained before it does irreparable harm. So here's the thing. Candela Obscura is not the only group that realizes that magic exists and can be used. They have both adversarial and frenemy relationships with a bunch of other groups. They have their own competing philosophical stances on what to do with magic or about magic, and that creates some tension inside the game, which is a rather interesting way to do it. Now, there's also a primary religion inside the country where New Fair is located. It is mostly corrupt. It is bent on its own power and control. It spins right into the whole Gilded Age ethos of the game. There's corruption among the rich and the powerful, and power is going to be one of the primary drama engines for this game as the rich continue to try to prop themselves up at the expense of others, and the church in this world is no different than anything else. Also very similar to a real world analog. And as a pastor, that hurts me to say, but it's definitely true. So the setting of New Fair is well designed. There are locations that are given different write-ups inside the city of New Fair as well as the surrounding region, and there are a number of NPCs who are fleshed out, and they are set inside the world in these different locations where the PCs can encounter them. Also, for each of the different areas that's given a write-up, there are adventure ideas that are given or assignment ideas that are given that are laid out and can be tied to these locations, which further gives them some depth. All in all, the world is really cool. It is interesting, and they did a very good job laying it out and making it breathe. So there are 9 key actions in the game. And really, actions are how the game is designed rather than traditional attributes. These 9 key actions, however, are split into 3 groups, and these could be more analogous to attributes in a game like Monte Cook, like Cipher System, where you have to spend them in order to use them. And I like that kind of concept. The 3 groups are Nerve, which consists of the actions Move, Strike, and Control. So that's you're doing special acrobatic stuff, attacking with your hands or with a stick, and Control, I think, is more for driving. Cunning is a Sway and a Read and a Hide. So you're trying to persuade someone to do something. You're trying to read the situation or hide from detection. And then you have Intuition, which has the actions Survey, Focus, and Sense, which are pretty self-explanatory. Each action inside the groups has 3 checkboxes, so they can be ranked from 0 all the way up to 3. And the number of checkboxes that are blank or filled in inside the action is going to determine the number of d6s that you roll for each of the checks. Each section, however, has a resource called Drive, and this is where the analogy to Cipher System comes into play. You can spend Drive in each of your groups for any action that is in that group. So every Drive point that you spend, you add a d6 to your roll, and that's going to give you more of a chance to succeed. In addition to Drive, some of your actions inside the group are gilded. There's a little box next to the action that will tell you if it's gilded or not. So when you roll for a check that uses that action, you are going to add a different color d6 on it, and that's going to be your gilded die. If you roll and you take that d6's result, you're going to regain 1 Drive point for that group. This gives you a little bit of an incentive to take maybe a lesser success or even a failure if you really want to regain Drive so you can affect rolls in the future. I love concepts like that, and I'm glad that it's here in Candela Obscura. Anything that gives you an option or an incentive to be less of a superhero, I think is kind of cool. You also have resistances. These are built up by how much drive you have in each group of your actions. Every 3 points of drive that you have grants you 1 resistance. You can spend your resistance points in order to reroll a result that you do not want. However, when you spend a resistance to reroll a die, you must take the new result. So if you had a mixed success and you're going for a full success, which I will explain in a minute, if you roll and get a failure, suddenly you have to take the failure. There's always a risk in using your resistances, and I kind of like that. Now, action rolls, which we've mentioned but not described yet, are rather simple. Each has 3 levels, and they're not mechanically driven as much as they are narratively driven. The game master is going to determine what the stakes are. A low stakes roll means that failing the roll won't lead to huge consequences or damage. Standard stakes, which is the default for every check inside the game, means that a failure or a mixed success might lead to significant danger and an escalation in the narrative, and it might give you some damage. And then a high stakes roll is going to be very intense, because if you have a failure or a mixed success, they will automatically lead to immediate danger and a narrative escalation and damage, strikes or marks to your character. And so there's a way that the GM's going to be handling the narrative intensity for each of the checks, depending on how they determine what this roll is doing. So it's not going to be a mechanical change, it's just a narrative change. The rolls are also simple to resolve. The GM's going to determine which action roll is called for when a player says what they are going to do, and the player rolls the number of dice that's indicated for that action, or they may, as I mentioned earlier, spend drive points to add some dice to the rolls. And if a character needs to undertake an action for which they have no boxes checked, they are allowed to roll 2 dice and then take the lower number. They're essentially rolling with disadvantage, or a bane if you're going to talk easy D6 language. The results are really easy to read. You look for the highest number. A 1 through a 3 is a failure, a 4 through a 5 is a mixed success, and a 6 is a mixed success. However, if the character rolls more than 1 6, so double 6s or more, you get a critical success, and that means that something extra good happens to you. You get to expand the narrative even more in a beneficial way for the characters. I like that idea. It's kind of cool. I also love the way that damage is handled in the game. You have marks And there's 3 categories of marks for body, mind, and bleed. These are the different ways that you can be affected by the world around you. Physical damage, mental damage, and bleed is magical infection. You can take 3 marks in each category. The 4th mark that you would take in each category is going to incapacitate you and leave you with a scar. A scar requires that you take 1 action point from 1 action and put it somewhere else to a new action, because the scars now changed your character mentally or physically or emotionally from the magical effect. When you get 4 scars, however, the character has to be retired from play because they have been too traumatized by the work to be out in the field anymore, and they could die. That's a really interesting way. You're building up scars of the character. The scars and the damage that you take is changing the way the character functions mechanically in the game, which is going to change their personality. What are they going to attempt to do? And I like the idea that you can be damaged so much that you no longer could be in the field, but you don't necessarily disappear from the narrative. The character becomes an NPC. Really, really cool. So there's no character classes in the game. Instead, you have roles, and each role has 2 specialties. The roles are face, which has the specialties of journalist or street magician. Muscle, which gives you the specialties of explorer or soldier. A scholar, which has the specialties of doctor or professor. A slink, which I think is really a cool name. The specialties for that are criminal or detective. I like how you put those 2 together. And then you have the weird people, which that's also fun. These people are mediums, so they have a connection to the afterlife, or an occultist. They're connected to magical phenomenon or other weird stuff. Character builds are really simple for everything. Each specialty has some action points, drive points, and gilded actions that are pre-assigned. Players then can adjust these starting points by assigning extra points to where they want to go. And though the action point you spend has to raise 1 action from 0 to 1. You can't double up and say, okay, I have a 2 here, I'm going to make it a 3. You have to raise something from a 0 rating to a 1 rating when you add that point to it. Then when you have all your drive points assigned, players can tally up their resistances. And again, for every 3 points of drive they have in each grouping, they get 1 point of resistance, and that will be marked on the sheet somewhere. Each role in each specialty also has a list of abilities from which they can choose. Players choose one that is role-based and then one that is specialty-based. And the abilities have a really wide range of effects inside the game. They can actually create new NPC contacts. They can modify an action roll's dice pool, strengthening it, or they can even allow you to soak damage, burning a resistance to not take a mark to your character sheet and let your character survive a little bit longer in this very dangerous and bizarre world. It's really simple to put together. It's a very straightforward process, and you can create some really interesting characters through it. Gear is also rather simple. Some gear has mechanical benefits in the game that are going to do things like adjust rolls, or they're going to give you a little bit more of a boost to resist something. And gear can actually be your personal property, circle-owned gear, or provided by Candela Obscura itself, because your characters are playing agents of Candela Obscura. When you're going through an assignment, which is what adventures are called in this game, each character will have 3 slots that they can fill up with gear. These reset for each assignment. However, you are not encouraged to choose your gear at the start of an assignment. Players will declare that they have an item when they have a need for something. So you're not carrying around a bunch of worthless gear because you have over-prepared, like every character in a fantasy game who has a grappling hook, even though they have no skill for climbing and they haven't encountered cliffs yet and they haven't reported anything about there being cliffs where they are going, but everybody's got a grappling hook. That doesn't happen in Candela Obscura. You go, hey, I have this, and you have a magical pocket that allows you to have 3 items. You're going to get something that's useful for that investigation, but you only get to do it 3 times, so it's a resource you have to manage. I enjoy that a lot. When players are creating their characters, then they are encouraged to spend time in conversation determining what the character relationships are. There are, in fact, a list of guided questions on pages 34 to 37 in the book. Now, this is a concept I first encountered with Kids on Bike, and I thought it would not be a fun process at the time. I want to roll my character up and I want to get going. I don't want to spend time working on the narrative. I want that to emerge in the game. However, I actually followed the connection concept in my Numenera group. It created a fantastic starting point for both character connections and for the group's first adventure because it's tied into one of their backgrounds. So I'm becoming a fan of this concept, and I like the way that Candela Obscura actually handles it. It's very straightforward and simple, doesn't take a whole lot of time at all, but it gives a lot of depth to the characters right from the start, and that's pretty cool. So in Candela Obscura, a party is actually called a circle. That's the connection to the organization of Candela Obscura. The circle is their group. They are going to be run by someone called a light keeper, and their home base is going to be called a lighthouse. A circle is a rather interesting concept because it's almost like a meta PC in its own right. It includes resources and abilities which are available to the PCs during an assignment. It also has its own progression track called an illumination track, which tracks the circle's growth, and when you fill it, you get certain benefits from it. It's a neat idea. Circles are actually created through conversation, and there are 6 prompting questions on page 31. You can choose one of them or do a random roll to determine which one applies to your circle. And you have a sheet for abilities, resources, and your chapter house. This all comes together through your conversation that you have, and you include building the light keeper who is in charge of being the conduit between the circle and the wider organization. It's the light keeper who will hand out all your assignments. I like how this is all done as the players flesh it out together. And again, I didn't like this concept when I first encountered it, but the more that I use it and the more that I have seen it in play, the more I really enjoy it. And to have your circle have a background without making all the characters and the circles super heroic right at the start, that's a really nicely done feature. I like the circle concept a lot. So, starting at page 159 and going all the way to the end of the book is material for the GM. There is good advice for preparing players for the world that they're going into and for situating the relationships around the table. It gives you ideas for ways to elevate the tension inside the game and ways to evaluate the stakes for rolls. Is it going to be high, normal, or low? It also gives a number of example assignments or adventures inside this book. And some are rather interesting stories that give a whole wide range of places you can go and mysteries that you can explore. One of the things I did not appreciate as I was reading the book is that they were written in such a linear fashion. The way the assignments unfold, as they're presented anyway, feels predetermined. You're going to start here and you're going to end up over here. And so as I was reading the book, what's at stake then is not how the story ends, but how you get to the end, because the end is already set. And this is one thing I did not appreciate about the game as I was working through it. Now, it's not entirely a railroad because the actions and the decisions that players make during their investigation, even though the end might be predetermined, is going to create real in-world impacts that are going to have an ongoing effect on the game. So I understand what they're doing. I kind of would like a little bit more branches inside the adventures itself. But here's the thing. Candela Obscura is a short form game. It's designed for smaller arcs, not for long form campaigns that are going to go on for years and years and years. So those real in-world ongoing encounters or impacts from a character's decision during an investigation are going to impact how that new arc keeps going. These characters are going to show up again, or the consequences of actions are going to go showing up again in the short form. So it's going to create a tension there. So I kind of like that. I also realize that because this is for short-term arcs, assignments are more like one-shots than adventures in a long-term campaign. They tend towards more linear adventure styles because that's the way one-shots work. You want to get to the end of the adventure, and if it was ongoing or ambiguous or wide-ranging, you would not be able to do that. And having written a few one-shots, I can see that it's linear. Still would like a few branching paths just to maybe give characters a little bit more flexibility in how they go about the investigation, but I understand why it's written the way that it is written. So all in all, it's a really cool idea. There's some great advice given in the GM section, and it's a very simple narrative game to run. So this is an interesting narrative game. It's got fast mechanics. It's got a creepy and well-defined setting. And in my look at the layout and design of this book, I noted that the background material presented in it also has handwritten notes that are just kind of laying inside this fake dossier of the book itself. Now, I do say that some of this background material is too small for my tired eyes to read. I actually have to take pictures of it to blow it up or go get the PDF so I can zoom in on my own. But one of the interesting things about that background material is that it highlights some of the mysteries of the world and the war from which the world is recovering. There's some things that go on in that background material that show you that the end of the world might have not been as great and awesome as folks are celebrating. It might have given a whole lot more problems for Candela Obscura to deal with. So it's really cool. I think that Candela Obscura is great for a one-shot game and even for a short arc of 3 or 4 sessions. I may even try to get my neighbors to play the game on New Year's. We shall have to see. If you want to pick up Candela Obscura for yourself, you can pick up a copy at Darrington Press's website. The print copy is $39.99. PDF is $19.99. I did not see a combination package inside the website, so I'm not sure if you buy the print copy that you're automatically going to get the PDF. It's a bit of a bummer there. But if you're going to buy both together, it's about $60, which is about what a new RPG is going for these days anyway. It's something that you might consider checking out. I've seen a lot of YouTube thumbnails about Candela Obscura which are negative towards the game. Have not watched any of them yet. My reaction to the game, having not really checked out any of the inspirations of the game, like a lot of people will say that it's very similar to Blades in the Dark. I can't speak to that because I only have read Candela Obscura. I find it interesting, and I do think that it's something that is worth checking out if you want kind of a creepy occultic investigation game that is really good for short-term arcs. Coming up, I have started reading the game called Adventurous, which is a simple game with a ton of personality. Looking forward to getting that out to you all. And after that, I am finally going to start reading Marvel Multiverse because dang it, it has been too long and it has been mocking me on my shelf and I'm tired of it laughing at me every time I come down to do a review. So I'm reading that after Adventurous. That'll be great. On December 28th at 8 p.m., I'll be joining a live stream playing a new system called Sagas, S-A-G-A-S, with some folks from Avenue Studios. I'm going to try to put the link to that in the description below. I can't get the description to the actual stream, but to their stream page. You can find it on there. January 6th, I'm going to be at the Philly Area Gaming Expo in Oaks, PA. Going to get to play my first funnel for DCC as well as a BECME game, Beyond the Lost City. Hoping also to meet some folks there from the aforementioned Avenue Studios as well as a couple other people. And if you're going to be at the Philly Area Gaming Expo, let me know. I would love to pop in or have a chat with you at some point while we are there. Then on January 25th, I am really excited to announce that I'm going to be chatting with Bob Worldbuilder on the Skipping Lunch stream. Really looking forward to it. He's such a nice guy. He's done some really cool stuff, and I want to talk about his experience building his YouTube channel, his love of the game, and how he's made this his career. So I hope that everyone has a happy and a healthy new year, and until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.